Okay, all right. You've landed on Island 49. I'm your host, Weston Smith, being joined this afternoon by a very special guest, Steph Sanchez. You know her from 49 Carats Pod, the bully ball through the gold standard with a fan favorite here as well, Mr. Jason Aponte. So, Steph, sincerely appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to join us here on the island.
Oh yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no worries. So, Steph, I was playing to your ego, and I know you don't have an ego. I'm just joking with you. Behind the scenes here is jumping on a little bit about all the wonderful things you did leading up to the 2023 NFL draft. Obviously, focused in on our San Francisco 49ers, but inevitably, a lot of the people that you talked to certainly didn't wind up on the roster, and you had a lot of good information that you were able to share publicly to other fan bases. Here's information about said player, and I thought it was awesome. I thought you were so well um organized to for lack of a better word, related to like top 30 visits and pro days and what was taking place. I said to you, you were my go-to resource throughout the draft. So here's a fan, and I appreciate all the work that you put in, but I'd love to take a stroll down memory lane with you for a little bit and talk
Yeah.
about some of those interviews and kind of your personal thought process for the 49ers and just for yourself and your strategy and your business, as you were approaching the draft. So hope that's okay for you.
Yeah, yeah, of course. It was actually kind of funny because like in the past, I would only do I would track if the 49ers went to a certain pro days and things like that. And I would tweet out, oh, they were at this one, they were at this one, blah, blah, blah. And then someone tweeted at me and they were like, I would pay for like this to see this kind of content. And I was like, oh, like I'd never thought of that before. So that's kind of where the draft sheet kind of came to be. And of course, it is free, but with the intention of, kind of centralizing everything. And maybe, someday in the future, I don't know, it could be a subscription only type of content. I don't know, a buck or three for like, you get it for the entire draft season or whatever. I feel is reasonable. But yeah, that's pretty much how it came about. It was just someone suggesting like, hey, like you should do this. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, that's not a bad idea because it is easy to lose track of those things on Twitter, right? I mean,
Yep.
you're just sending individual tweets. But this way, putting it all together in a sheet was just a way of keeping it centralized. And also, my goal is with over time being able to, see different trends, what kinds of players are the 49ers meeting with. And top 30 visits, of course, is a great deal of emphasis because I've pointed out the 49ers do draft. Typically, they end up drafting a number of those guys. So, your best bet, if you were to want to narrow down who the 49ers may eventually draft, is those top 30 visits, right? So, I feel like those are pretty good odds this season. So, I had tracked for the top 30 visits, ended up getting drafted to the 49ers, and turns out it was five. Matt Barrows actually pointed out that it was five afterwards in a recent article that he put out. And so I think the one I missed that probably wasn't, widely reported was Jalen Graham. And then the others did not have top 30 visits. So five players out of those top 30, that the 49ers ended up drafting. So again, pretty good odds, I would say. So yeah, I mean, that was kind of just the intention of trying to find out and source as much information as possible as to like who the 49ers are talking to, who they're interested in, things like that. And so it was a successful first year. I think there's some things, next year that I think I can improve on. But yeah, definitely I felt like this was a good first go at it.
So let me ask you, because now we know the why, right? As
Yeah.
to why the change from the 2022 draft preparation to 2023. I think this is probably the most obvious question you'll get asked today, but clearly a much heavier lift to provide the level of content and detail that you did. Did it at any point did it feel like a job, or did it always just
Yes.
feel like a hobby and something that you just couldn't get enough of?
100%, it did feel like a job at some points, but I like At the same time, it was a hobby. It just was a lot of work, is kind of what I mean. It wasn't a job in the sense that I dreaded doing it. It was more so, it was a lot of work.
Mhm.
But I think, in the future, that kind of feedback for myself is start a little earlier, maybe, because it's tough because the 49ers season, their season ends a little early or later when they go to the playoffs, right? When most other teams, their draft season starts as soon as their season ends, right? And
Yep.
and for different teams have different times when that happens. So yeah, it was kind of like, okay, the season ended. Oh shit! Like now we gotta, we gotta, like Senior Bowls, like next week or 2 weeks from now. Like we gotta go. We gotta start on this. So it was at the beginning a bit of a rush, like to
Sure.
just get everything all together, and that's why I think it felt like a lot of work because it was like, man, I gotta get on this. Like so, yeah, it was several hours in the day, like putting that together in the first like probably like March and all that.
So lesson learned here, and you heard it from Steph directly, is
Don't
even
procrastinate.
something that's intended to be a hobby, every once in a while, it's going to feel a little bit heavier than you intended. But if you love it, you keep working through it. You find ways to fine tune it. And you heard it here first. Well, maybe not first, but on Island 49. So next year, everybody buck up. It's well worth the 5, 10, 20, whatever Steph asks you to pay for it. I promise you the content's worth the while, and you'll be better prepared for your own team heading into the draft, which candidly is always a crapshoot. I find it kind of fun that there is this, I don't want to say obvious tell, but the 49ers do put a lot of stock into those top 30 visits. And then
Yeah.
this year in particular just felt different because they weren't filled with obvious names that are going in the first 30, 40
Right.
picks of a
Yep.
draft. I mean, for all intents and purposes, we truly didn't pick till the fourth round when you're looking at compensatory numbers in the third
Yeah.
round. So what I loved, just like interesting names, right? That you're looking at it and like, normally you're like, they got to kick the tires on somebody who's probably well out of their reach in the first round, but because they're drafting in the first round and there's some slips, I
Yeah.
guarantee even the most knowledgeable 49er fans were opening up some of this content, looking at these top 30 visits and being like, who the hell is that guy? I have no idea
Yeah.
where that guy came from.
Right. And to your point, I mean, it is because you don't have those top names in the first round. Cause usually I feel like, yeah, the 49ers have done a great job of like, I think they meet with players kind of all across the board of like, you know, where they may go.
Mhm.
Like historically, this regime has kind of done that. Like they've even in the past had top 30 visits with players that end up being undrafted free agents and they sign later, right? So it's not some teams I feel like they'll bring 30 guys in to figure out who they want to draft in the first round. But, some teams work differently. I feel like the 49ers do have like a pretty good range of
Yeah.
who they want to meet with. But yeah, I think that's why this year, especially, like there were some names that maybe not a lot of us knew beforehand because it's not going to be those first, second round
Yep.
prospects. It's going to be the the guys a little later.
Well, God willing, we're back to normal draft life for the foreseeable future, at least for the next couple of years until
Yeah.
another move is made. And in all fairness to you, you mentioned starting earlier. You know,
hmm
the individuals that do this for the teams, they've already started for next year, right? So, like
Yeah.
in fairness to you,
Yeah.
there's some other things that we work through in the year before you can actually make the time and the space
hmm
for quote unquote draft preparation. So one of the things that I love, Steph, was just kind of the shorter videos of interviewing these prospects. And one, I'm sure it was a really cool experience just being able to kind of pick the brains, kind of like what I'm doing here with you right now, picking your brain a little bit about like what they've learned, how they view themselves. Cause some of these players, aren't necessarily household names per se, right?
hmm
But they're gonna make a roster. They're gonna
Yeah.
get an opportunity. So I always make this argument. Like I never poo-poo a player in any professional sport because they are the elite of the elite. So even if one is signified as they're not good, they're still an elite athlete to be at
Yeah.
this level and in contention for this level. And
Yeah.
that's how I view these
Absolutely.
prospects, right? They're still elite to get to where they are. So I have to imagine a really cool experience, But did you learn, like, was there any commonalities from these, let's call them underdogs, right? Like the underdog mentality that these folks might carry, understanding that they probably have been overlooked several times in their career, but still trying to make a name for yourself. Like what might have stood out from the darn near 30 different players that you interviewed heading into the draft?
Yeah, I mean, definitely throughout that process, I feel like I grew a greater respect for just what they do, the hard work that they put in. They dedicate their lives basically to, making it in the NFL. So to see some of those guys get drafted and, get invited to rookie mini camps, even, all of that, it's great to see, just because in hearing them talk and talk about their journey and all that, what how they've been preparing for this moment, it's so much work. And again, it's just to make that dream come true, right? So yeah, I've grown a greater appreciation for these guys and just players in general. I kind of feel like, man, I can't talk badly about any player, not just for the reason you said, but like to some extent, in knowing a few of them, I feel like in a sense I know all of them because they all come from that same kind of like background of they've been working at this their entire lives, right? So I have a respect for all players. I think after being able to interview just a few of them. But yeah, I feel like some of the commonalities of some of those guys, because obviously some of the guys that I interviewed, some of them went to like all the all-star games like the Hula Bowl or like the Shrine Bowl, things like that. But they're still relatively like lower tier prospects that probably some of them did get drafted, but the majority of them ended up being undrafted free agent signings after the draft. And so I think a lot of them as well, being in smaller schools, things like that, they feel like they got to work just a little bit harder to get recognized, right? And so they just talk about how much a chip on their shoulder they have. A few of them, I like asked them like, what how did you feel like preparing for your pro day, knowing or seeing some of the numbers you saw at the combine? Like, did you feel like you had to kind of do better than some of those numbers? They were like, "Yeah, like hell yeah." Most of them, they feel it's like personal almost, like because a lot of the prospects that go to the combine are seen as like, some of the top prospects
Sure.
in the nation, right? And so for them, it's almost all of them have a competitive nature, even within themselves. Like a lot of them are hard on themselves, like some weren't happy with their pro day, things like just little things like that. And it's not that it's even a bad pro day, but they all have that like competitive nature of, they could always do better,
Yeah.
So those are some of the commonalities that I saw. And, all of them were pretty humble, just like great guys, great characters.
Yeah, no, I think when I watch these videos, it's hard for me. Some of them never heard the name before, right? Some I am
Yeah.
familiar with, but it's hard to not just root for them all as individuals and like want to
Right.
follow any career trajectory, because I
Yeah.
think you hit the nail right on the head. Working at it their whole life, as children, we run around in our backyards or in the streets or wherever we grew up and whatever we had access to, dreaming of hoisting that trophy, hitting the game-winning shot, kicking the game-winning field goal, whatever it might be, right? And you dream about that as a little youngster, and
Yeah.
to almost feel like it's that close, right? And all the work
Hmm.
that you've put in, it's so hard to not just be like, I'm a fan. I'm just a
Right.
fan of
Yeah.
you, right? Like,
Basically, that's how
and
I felt.
and that's how I don't know about you, but that's how I love my football players, right? As a fan of any team, it's I want the guys with the chips on their shoulders who have
Yeah.
been turned away and told no, or you're too small, you're too slow, your arm's not
Yeah.
strong enough. That's just it's they call it bulletin board material, locker room material, whatever it is that you are facing every single day. And if that doesn't
Yeah.
fuel your fire, I really don't know what does, versus like the player who may have been told their whole life that they're the greatest thing since sliced bread. And,
Yeah.
they have just this God given ability, and might suffer a little bit on the work ethic because they've always just been head and shoulders from a talent
Right.
perspective above
Yeah.
folks. I mean, This is how I love my offensive lineman. I want every offensive lineman on every NFL team to be an undrafted free agent that played at some D2 school that nobody knows
Yeah,
about and is just an animal because like they tend to work out in the NFL,
right.
believe it or not,
Yeah.
more often than not. You mentioned some of the bowl games. Well, you also mentioned like the combine, Senior Bowl. Keep me honest here. Your first year in attendance at both of those?
Yeah, yeah, and that was a great experience too. That was really like my first experience like interviewing players at all was the Senior Bowl. And we got to get on the field like after practice. They had like 10-15 minutes you can interview players. And so like honestly, I was pretty nervous because it was such a rush after the 49ers season ended. I also didn't feel like I knew a lot of those guys like at that point. Senior Bowl to me was kind of like the beginning of draft season. It was kind of like the introductory period. I was getting to know some of these guys as seeing them on the field and who stood out and whatnot. Um, so that's why I say like next year I got to start earlier because I need to kind of know like who these guys are before I start trying to ask questions, or you're gonna go in there with like really general questions, which is fine. I mean, like I was there listening to other people ask questions, and a lot of them were pretty like
Yeah.
general stuff too. So I didn't feel too bad, but I was nervous, and I think it did show. Now at the combine, I was way more prepared before every day, and the interview started at like 8 in the morning. Before every day I would have a list of the players I wanted to talk to, and I'd kind of have like a certain set of questions tailored to that player too. Yeah, I did have some kind of general questions, but I kind of looked into some of these guys beforehand as well. So I think through that and me being able to do the interviews on my channel, it kind of got easier as I went on. But yeah, both of those were great experiences, and hopefully I could do it again next year as well.
Yeah, I hope so too. I have to imagine. Now, keep me honest here because this is just my own in my own little world that I live in. When I think about the combine, to me, the combine, and this is no slate to the event. I know there's a ton of merit behind it, but the on the field activity to me just feels so much like a dog and pony show, right? Like we already know who's fast. We already know for the most part
Yeah,
who can
yeah.
jump real high,
Mhm.
and who's got talent. Now that you've been there and you've seen both off the field and on the field happenings at an event like that, do you walk away with a different sentiment maybe that is more like these players make their money in the off the field interview portions and how they handle themselves and conduct themselves with the team versus what they actually do on the field?
I think it's a mix of both, and it really depends like what the team, kind of values, right? I
Yeah.
think both of those hand in hand have to be considered for all teams. And certainly I feel like the 49ers look at both things and pretty heavily, and they do, I think, put an emphasis on how those interviews go and just like being a culture fit with a team. So yeah, I mean, I feel there's good and bad of each process. I think obviously the combine, I feel like the biggest thing is the interviews for the combine, because other than that it's like a lot of players call it the underwear Olympics, because that's what it is, right?
Yeah.
And honestly the players can't wait to just get back to being able to do like football prep, once their pro days, once the combine's over, they can just focus on getting better at football instead of like speed and agility testing that they're never going to have to do ever again in their lives. But yeah, I mean, the Senior Bowl is cool because you get to see them play against each other. So I feel like that aspect is really important as well, to see how they do against like, some of the best players in the nation. And just how they compete, how they learn,
Yeah.
things like that. I know the 49ers do like, that's a big part of their evaluation process as well, just like the Senior Bowl in general. And I think because like they're, Kyle's first season as 49ers head coach, he coached the Senior Bowl, right?
Yep.
So I feel like since then, they kind of have a lot of respect for that process, and I think they value that a lot as well.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of the general makeup of the players that participate in the Senior Bowl fit a lot of what I think just this 49ers regime
Hmm.
values.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
by definition, a senior, a lot of them happen to have experience, right?
Yeah,
And that's one of the things that I think they look for as well. Almost like a collegiate vet. I know they're about to be an NFL rookie, but someone who's just seen the field a lot, even if it's from a smaller program or even some of
right.
the big time programs. So I have to imagine, because there's so much more on field participation, obviously, in the Senior Bowl, and it's padded, right? Padded
Yeah,
practice, an
yeah.
actual game. It's hard to put a lot of. Forgive me if you hear the ruckus above me. I guess the little guy's awake and dogs are going crazy.
I
Hope
don't-
that's not too loud, but like the scene to me, the Senior Bowl is just kind of it's the game. The game itself is hard for me to put a ton of stock into because there's obviously different rules. It's only a week of practice. Like how much of these individuals really gel
yeah,
into a playbook that's really simplified. But the week of practice
yeah,
has to be
yeah.
pretty amazing when you're watching like a lot of one-on-one repetition. Especially for me, I look at it like it's an opportunity for D-backs to stand out and linemen to stand out because you just see a lot of one-on-one. Like I
Yeah,
love wide
yeah,
receivers. We're all divas, but it's real easy to create separation and space in a one-on-one drill, right? When you got the whole field that you can play with. I
right.
look for like,
Yeah,
what do the DBs hips look like? Are they like glue? Are they all over these folks? So I'm sure you saw a lot of the same, but I'm sure it was just kind of awesome to rub elbows with people from all walks of life that are attending that, trying to do similar things that you're doing as well for different fan bases.
for sure. I mean, I did meet a lot of people out there, and got to network. So to me, that was also like one of the best parts of just experiencing that. Aside from being able to interview players, I think that's like the second most valuable part for me, who's trying to do more of this. Yeah, it was real fun.
So on in the vein of interviewing these players, of the 30 or so that you had on the channel on 49K, what was who was your this is a two-part question.
Hmm.
Who was your favorite interview? So just based on the interview and the conversation. And then the second part's that, and I hope I don't get you in trouble with the people
No,
that have
no.
had you on, but who might have been your favorite prospect, specifically that your own team might, that you would insist that they target. So who's your favorite interview? And then who might be your favorite prospect of the bunch?
Okay. So I'm gonna answer the favorite interview like this because like there's two types of favorite interviews. I feel like it's like one is like he's such a personable person that it was just easy to have such a great conversation with him. He kind of just he was bubbly. He just had a great personality. It was actually San Jose State cornerback Nehemiah Shelton was probably one of my favorite interviews just from that aspect. But also just from like getting to and also I mean there's probably a few of my like favorite interviews as well. I'll say that.
Like
Like
I said, I didn't want to put you on the
yeah,
spot
no,
and
no,
get
no,
you in
you're
trouble
good.
with anybody.
And like so any time I had those like very like memorable ones, I'd say it at the end like this is I don't know if I always said it in the video, but I would definitely tell them after like thank you, like that was one of my favorite interviews. Um so it's hard to rank them from there, but Nehemiah Shelton was definitely one of those. I feel like Tyler Wiltz actually was one of those too. He's the linebacker out of Pitt. And yeah, that one was fun. Just like both of those guys had really great personalities and they were laughing. It's just really easy to talk to them. It didn't feel like an interview at some point. So that's always great. Um, and then just from the standpoint of like, yeah, this guy's like so blue collar and he's so professional. Ty Okada out of Montana State, he's a safety. So I'd say like from a professional standpoint, he was probably the best interview. He just gave like really thoughtful, insightful answers. And I really wanted the 49ers to like pick him up because he went undrafted, but I wanted them to pick him up as a priority free agent. And that didn't work out. I mean, I know the 49ers had a lot of interest in him. He ended up going to the Seahawks actually as an
Not
undrafted free
surprised.
agent. So I was like, God damn it. But you know what? I'm gonna root for him just because like he was someone that I really liked in the process. I kept in touch with him, even after interviewing him. So just some of those guys you just can't help but feel a connection to and want to root for them. So he was definitely one of those guys for me.
It's I know we're taking a step back, but I just can't help but make this statement that one of the things again that you learn from these types of conversations, especially from your perspective or even myself who's just listening to it, is that you're reminded that these are all just people.
Yeah.
These are all just people,
Yeah.
like I think as what is fan short for? Fanatical, right? And we're all crazy in our own mind with our own expectations. But I think too often and maybe in my youth I probably felt the same way. I'm a little bit older now with a family, right? So I view this world a little bit differently. But there was just always viewed as entertainment, right? And
Mhm.
now to me it's like, no, these are people. And I think what I love about the work that you're putting out, Steph, is like you give these individuals, a platform to present themselves as people, right? And
Yeah.
not just about the game that has quote unquote defined them in so many different ways, but whatever it is, right? I'm sure you give them the forum to speak of like wherever the conversation might go, interests, post career or whatever it might be. And I
Right.
think that's what's so awesome is just the constant reminder of this might be a league that is set up and created and makes billions of dollars by being entertainment, but that league doesn't exist without individuals working
Right.
to perfect the craft. And I think that's important to call out and what you're, and I think that you do call that out without even having to say that, right? That's what the interview forum really at least provides me from my standpoint. All
Yeah, for
right.
sure. For
Can I
sure.
tell you who my favorite was? Is that allowed since
Yeah,
I didn't
yeah.
conduct these?
Yeah.
And I'm
I'm
not even going to
all
lie. This
ears.
is a completely biased opinion. Now, I won't say that I
Okay.
listened to all 30. I'd say I got through probably about like 24, 25 of them.
Okay. That's
But
pretty close.
my boy, Tim Demurant from the
The
quarterback
more,
from
yes.
Fordham. So
Yes.
I'm a Fordham grad. So that's where the
Okay.
bias comes from. And the Boogie Down Bronx is right around the way. That's where I'm at. Rose Hill,
Yeah.
shout out Rams. But I was like, yep, we're watching that one. We went-
I liked him a lot. I feel like he was underrated for
yeah,
sure because like before, the interview, obviously, like I throw on some of Fordham games, as many as I could find on YouTube. It's kind of hard to find.
yeah.
But what I did find, he was pretty good. Like he can sling it, man, and he looked good. I think he played in the Shrine Bowl or the Hula Bowl, one of those, and like he had like a really long touchdown in one of those games. And I I honestly felt like if the 49ers went with a quarterback as an undrafted free agent, like he'd be a really good option to just like kind of take a flyer on. I forgot who he ended up getting picked up by. I don't know if you know, but
I don't. I should have even opened my big mouth. I should have looked at that, right?
no, no. I might have it like in the description at this point because I was trying to. Oh, Washington. He went to the Commanders. Great
Okay.
spot for him, honestly. So yeah, he was. I think he's underrated. He'll stick around. I think in the league.
Yeah. I mean, listen, plays in the Patriot League, right? Like they don't
He
get a
set
lot.
records.
I know, but it's still like even we sit there when they drafted Zakelj last year, you're like Fordham, right? Like you got to go
Yeah,
back and
yeah,
do some digging. What are you doing out there in the Bronx, New York, right now, picking up football talent? But Epic University, because that's where I went. Epic mustache on that gentleman, but
yeah,
he does have a big arm and he's talented. But they played in a really flashy offense. They slung the ball around. The name is
yeah,
escaping me, but that slot receiver that they brought over from I think NIU, who this was his first year. I mean, kid's a little player as well.
yeah.
He finds space, so they were a lot of fun. But I said it and I'll repeat it. this was a completely biased choice, and it's just based on alma mater that I gravitated towards that one.
No, but that's cool. Like, I'm curious to know what other people's like favorite was too, because I'm sure everyone will have like a different answer based on like a connection to the school or like
Yep.
maybe the player they've seen him before, just like any reason. Uh and because it was my first year doing all these interviews to this extent, I would definitely want to continue doing it, and people's feedback is always welcome.
Did you did you at any point toy with the idea of, I mean, I use the Super Bowl media week as an example where it's the most outlandish questions imaginable from some people. Did you toy with the idea of being like, how will they remember me? What is one off the wall question that I could ask every single prospect that won't get me thrown out? We'll have a chuckle about it, and maybe they will actually answer. Have you toyed with that idea at all?
No, like if there was like yes and no. I've seen other interviews where you kind of do like a rapid fire and you ask them like, fun things like
Yep.
PlayStation or Xbox or, waffles or pancake, just
Yep.
fun questions. So I did think about it. But at the end of the day, because this was my first time doing it, and I feel like because I'm a woman, doing this at the end of the day, I feel like I can't really toy around because if I do, I'm afraid someone's gonna think like, oh, it's she doesn't
Yeah.
take this seriously or anything like that. So like it did cross my mind, but I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna be professional. I'm gonna like not that there's anything wrong with like asking the fun questions.
Yep.
I personally, as a viewer of those or like a listener, I find those, pretty fun. But I guess like to the players, I just wanted to come off as professional and I know my stuff. So yeah, I ultimately didn't. There was a couple of times where, based on the player and certain things with them, I would ask them like kind of a fun question, like Ty Okada. I was like, dude, in all the pictures I saw online of you, you never have your mouth guard in. Like, what is that about?
Yeah.
So, like, it's like a really like fun question like that. And then Tim Demora, I asked him about his cousin Tosh Point oh. So like
Yep.
I worked it in where I saw that opportunity to kind of ask them, something like that. But for the most part, I kept it pretty serious, I would say.
It's funny because if I was in your shoes, I'd probably would have approached it the exact same way. Like, hey, wait, first go around, like I want to
Yeah,
be I want to be viewed as somebody who's like, this is not silly time. I'm
yeah,
giving you a forum. I know about this game, right? And now, but you do this for a year or two, all of a sudden you find a little bit of a different wrinkle you want to work in, and
yeah.
you
I
know,
could in the
and
future.
everybody walks away being like, oh, listen, you got to talk to Steph because she's going to ask you a question about what was your favorite on-campus restaurant, right? Like, or something like that, or fast food
Yeah.
joint at 2:30 in the morning. Find
I'll
out.
I'll usually like if I do have those fun questions, like I do save them like to the end because like I ask players like um I asked some of them like what's your kind of workout routine or like what's your day looking like now because sometimes they'd still be preparing for their pro day or I caught some of them like after they had finished their pro day and so
Yep.
the training had kind of changed and a few of them were like yeah like I do yoga things like that so I'd be like what's your favorite pose like because I do yoga too so like I was kind of interested and like so that kind of opens them up a little bit too. You get a little smile and, but yeah, you never know, like maybe starting the call with like an icebreaker of some sort just to get the smiles in early. It could change the dynamic of the interview. You never know.
Well, I'm gonna be tuned in tightly when that time comes and be like, is she gonna do it? Is she gonna pull the rabbit out of the hat on
Right.
this one?
Right.
I won't hold it against you if you don't, right? Obviously, you got to do your job too.
Yeah, someday here and there. We'll work
So,
that out.
Steph, I appreciate this. One last question before I let you go about your day. And again, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us. I can't let you walk out of here without addressing the elephant in the room, which year over year for this wonderful team that we decided to root for in our lifetime continues to rear its ugly head. given the light of Mr. Rappaport's recent comments on Monday about how the 49ers brass had reached out and
Mhm.
try to reset expectations, what do you make of this whole, what do you make of the quarterback situation as we sit here today on May 10th? And what do you make of even just Rappaport's initial comments, right, in late March to his, he didn't retract. He just mentioned that he was reached out to and dispelled what he was pushing out on Monday. What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I mean, well, first, there's a lot to unpack, right? I mean, this whole quarterback situation from like the get go has just been hell. But I will say, like, none of us, I don't think any of us know anything. Fans, we don't know anything. So to say, like, oh, I think Sam Darnold's going to be like QB1 if Brock Purdy, misses some time. First of all, we don't even know if Brock Purdy's going to miss any time. That's kind of the assumption. We're all just making assumptions at
Yep.
this point, and we're all just trying to, find whatever headline supports, what we already think, our biases or like what narrative we're already kind of like rolling with. I try to have like no narrative. I just want, I've said from the beginning, I just want Trey Lance to get a fair shot because like I don't really think he's gotten a fair shot. And yeah, it's been because of injuries for the most part, but also just somewhat the opportunities. Like Jimmy Garoppolo has always been there. Now Brock Purdy and now Sam Darnold is there. So like I just want him to be able to compete. And same for Sam Darnold. Like that could be something good. I'm not completely dismissing it. Though, people who are like, yes, Sam Darnold is going to be a completely different quarterback here. Like, I'm not so sure. Like, I don't know. I don't
Yeah.
know. Like let's like not assume anything right now. We don't know anything in May.
Yeah.
Things are going to be decided. Things are going to change, once they both get on the field, which I guess at this point both Trey and Darnold are on the field, right, for OTAs. But we won't really know anything until, the starting quarterback is announced for week 1, right? And that could be Brock, that could be Sam, that could be Trey. And in the meantime, I'm just along for the ride.
Yeah.
As far as Ian Rappaport's comments, like I mentioned this on Twitter that like I feel it's irresponsible for guys who like break news like Rappaport, Schefter,
Schefter. Yeah.
like all these guys who they do have opinions and sometimes they say those opinions, but then everyone else assumes that it's based on something they're hearing or it's some kind of report, which they don't always disclose whether what they're saying is an opinion or not. Like, and so everyone's just going to take it as some type of report or something they're like hearing. And so I don't know if that's something that he heard because again, I don't even think the team knows what they're gonna do. Like it would be so foolish for even the team to say like, oh yeah, Sam Darnold is gonna be our quarterback, our QB1 if Brock Purdy's out before even seeing both Darnold and Trey Lance on the field together. Don't you think? Like, would that be
Yeah.
weird for them to be saying that?
Yeah.
Yeah, go for it.
I was gonna say, I think, and please don't, I don't want this to sound too homerish, too fanish. I'm just frustrated. I'm frustrated. I think you
Yeah.
used it's
Yeah.
irresponsible, right? Like,
Yeah.
who are these just creating these narratives? Like, as of May 10th, we are exactly where we were when the clock struck
Yeah.
0 in the fourth quarter of the NFC Championship game. We don't know diddly squat about what's going to happen. There's
Exactly.
so much unknown about Brock. Like, everybody, rehab's going well. Really? Has he even thrown the football yet? Because we don't know how that's going to go and what that's going to look like after the fact. And look, I've been following this team for 30 plus years, right? So well acquainted with Matt Mayoko and how he tends to be used by the front office and the team as well. But like even narratives around, and this is nothing against Matt, right? It's not meant to be the best thrower of the ball. Like, what are we doing right now with these stories? It just doesn't make sense. And like, I'm a fan first. And my fandom says, I don't care who the quarterback is. Get me the Lombardi trophy. As long as they're playing well. If not, then I reserve the right to be hypercritical about playing somebody that's not playing well or ignoring to play somebody that you invested so much capital in that I agree has not gotten a fair opportunity, right? And I know life ain't fair, but like he really hasn't even been given an opportunity based on injury and circumstances. But here's what I can like. I'm not Team Trey. I'm not Team Brock.
Right. Same.
I'm
Same
pro
here.
San Francisco 49er.
Yeah.
Would I love to see Trey be what we all hoped he was and what they invested in? Yes, absolutely, of course, right? Would I love to see that Brock is he that guy? Did we really just steal a gem with Mr. Irrelevant? That'd be really cool. What I can confidently tell you is this is not the destination where Sam Darnold is going to revitalize his career. I said, you won't. I know you said you won't discount it, and you're right to not. But like, this is where my frustration has gone. Is like, it's not right. Like, there's nothing in his body of work at the NFL level excites me. Because if there was a lot of excitement, why are we seeing ghosts? Why are we being lobbied around the league? And again, I'm not knocking the player, right? I've said this before. I'm just saying that it just doesn't feel. It's what time of year is it, Steph? It's lying season. It's smoke season. It's wow, we're in the doldrums of the NFL offseason, free agency, draft gone. What can I conjure up to talk about?
I think it's fair to like have an opinion on, what happens with either or all of the quarterbacks. But we can't just make any absolutes, right? We can't, make any declarations about what's going to happen. An opinion is fine. And, at the end of the day, it's all noise. Everyone has an opinion. But it's not fact until they get on the field, until the 49ers tell us this is our starting quarterback week 1. So I'm just going with the flow. I'm open to anything happening because boy, have we seen anything happen for this quarterback situation like for years now. So I'm just prepared for any outcome.
So I know I said this was the last question. So question 1B to the final. Maybe I'll give you my thought on it. Is I agree that I think Ian Rappaport, instead of being like, hey, this was breaking news, shared his opinion, right? Based on what he may or may not know. But I had said after that, and I'm not alone in this camp, that like, hey, like, does he really know? He doesn't cover this team full time, right? Yeah. Like he covers the entire NFL. Like, it could be a lot of conjecture. Who knows? He thought
Mac Jones was the pick at 3.
Yeah. And convinced a lot of people that it was gonna be, right? Or that it was a that could be an opportunity. But ultimately, I don't think the 49ers, whatever he said on Monday, just my belief. And again, I have no facts. This is just my opinion. I don't think they called it. Like, why does it even benefit the 49ers in any capacity to reach out to Ian Rappaport and be like, yo, pump the brakes on your narrative? Like, what? Like, I'm actually more concerned if they did reach out, because then my question is not necessarily when, which I know has been posed, but why? Is this fracturing the ego of a 23-year-old quarterback in the NFL? Because that's a big problem, right? If that's what we're worried about and what we need to solve for. So I'm curious, like, the 1B of my question is, do you think it actually even happened? Or is this just more, let's continue the dialogue? And are you concerned if it did actually happen?
I think it did actually happen because, like, even when he was talking about it, he seemed like almost upset that he had to, like, say it like someone there told me, like, just the way he said it, he didn't feel too great about it. But the why is, I think, is the question on everyone's mind, right? And at the end of the day, we'll never know the why. I know some people think that, oh, it's because Trey Lance didn't get traded, so now they want to change their tune on Trey Lance. Someone, tweeted out a very interesting thing to me, and what I had responded to it. They said, a football organization is not a single cell organism. One person reaching out to Ian Rappaport doesn't mean that's like how the entire organization feels. And I mean, I will say, like, that one person, I mean, what Ian Rappaport said wasn't so much that they were saying, like, pull back on your Sam Darnold stuff, but more so like, why discount Trey Lance? Like, that, I think that was more so the thing. Like, why are you all in on Darnold? Like, probably they might be thinking the same way as we do. Like, hey, we haven't even seen both of these guys on the field at the same time. Like, what are we even doing here? Kind of thing. So again, it could have just been one person. We don't know who that person is. If it was someone like John Lynch or Kyle, like, sure, that does mean something, but like, other than that, we don't know who it was from the organization who reached out. We don't know, I guess when it happened, to your point. And then so people saying that it was because they're changing their tune on Trey Lance because he didn't get traded at the draft. That would only maybe be true if it happened after the draft, that someone reached out to Ian, which we will never know. It's
Yep.
Ian being asked about Sam Darnold on a live podcast, after the draft. He could have said it before then, but I don't know. I don't think he was asked about it before then, right? So, yeah, we'll never know the when. We'll never know the why. And
But
hey, I think the point is none of us know anything. So it's
so
like,
true.
why? What are you doing? Like, what are you doing saying these things? You don't know.
No,
So I
but the
think
show
that's
must
the
go on. The sun will come up, the sun will go down, and we will remain on the hamster wheel that is known
yeah,
as the 49er
yeah,
quarterback position, at least for the
absolutely.
foreseeable future. Steph,
Yep.
I can't thank you enough. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day. Again, gang, go give her the follow at 49 Carats, and also her and Jason Aponte through the Gold Standard Network with their Bully Ball podcast. You heard it from her. She's going to get to work early on the draft this year, but maybe not right away, of course. The season still looms large here as we get closer to the summer months. But Steph, thanks again. Team Island 49, make sure you like, subscribe. I spared you the intro video, but that means you're just going to get it on the way out here real fast. You can't fully walk away. But Steph, sincerely, thank you again for the time.
Thanks for having me.